I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Lawmakers across the country are looking at more than just jobs, jobs, jobs. We'll have a look at a wave of pro-life legislation in several states. Plus, congratulations are in order. One of Net's very own shows takes home an Emmy. We'll take you to the awards ceremony.
It's definitely a testament to the amazing work that we do at Net, as well as the hard work that the team actually puts in these shows.
And what do Snooki, Lady Gaga, and Pope John Paul II have in common? They were all at a recent Theology on Tap.
The main conflict was the lack of the spiritual, really, today. There's a lack of spirituality in popular culture.
Well, good evening, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. It is a development that seems to be sweeping the nation. In states across the U.S., bills placing various restrictions on abortion are being debated, voted on, and signed into law. Just last week in Arizona, Governor Jan Brewer signed a law making it a felony for a doctor to perform an abortion based on the race or gender of the unborn child. Now, that follows news about a bill advancing in Kansas that would ban abortion after the 21st week of pregnancy, and another bill in Idaho that would ban abortion after just 20 weeks. Now, the Kansas bill just needs the signature of Governor Sam Brownback, who is a Catholic pro-lifer, to become law. Now, meanwhile, Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell signed a bill last week that opponents say will force most of the abortion clinics in his state to shut down. The measure requires clinics performing first trimester abortions to meet the same standards as hospitals. Now, critics say the new regulations will require costly changes most clinics will be unable to afford, forcing them to close their doors. Well, joining me by phone now to talk about other pending abortion legislation and some of the bills I just mentioned as well, Mary Spalding-Balk. She's the state legislation director for the National Right to Life. Mary, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
Hey, no problem at all. Well, first of all, let's talk about sort of the overriding, I guess, look at what's happening in the states from, I guess, maybe some criticism. Some people on the other side of the issue of saying, well, you know, the 2010 election was really kind of all about jobs, 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 but there's been this major focus on the issue of abortion in the states. What do you say to that sort of criticism coming from the other side?
Well, I'm sure that they would like it to be like that, but the fact is that we have been having some substantive successes in the states. Now, this legislative process is still ongoing, and we have a lot of bills moving through the state's legislative body, but we expect to have some good laws at the end of the day.
All right. Well, as we move forward here, let's talk about some of these specific laws that I just mentioned. There's that bill, of course, in Kansas. There was one also, I believe it was in Idaho as well.
Yes.
Talking about you know, the banning of abortion procedures after the 20th or 21st week. Tell me a little bit about that push, and are there any pushes for similar bills in other states?
Yes. Well, those bills are based on the unborn child's capability to feel pain. Last year, Nebraska passed a law that said that the science is showing that the unborn child is capable of feeling pain at 20 weeks after fertilization. Nebraska passed that into law. It was in law to address a specific notorious late abortionist out there, and it was actually effective in sending that abortionist out of Nebraska. He has now gone to 3 other states to ply his ware, but other states this year are taking up that bill. You mentioned Kansas, Idaho, Oklahoma. A few others are on the same path. And as I said, it's based on the capacity of the unborn child at 20 weeks fertilization to feel pain.
Sure. I guess one of maybe the more controversial bills that's kind of come up, maybe not, I guess most controversial, but one that's, I guess, caused a lot of debate out there has been the one in Virginia that we talked about. Some people on the other side of the issue are saying that this is going to force a lot of the abortion clinics in the state of Virginia to close down. Tell us a little bit about that bill.
Well, that's a bill that would regulate abortion facilities in the same manner that you would regulate ambulatory freestanding clinics. And the problem is that these abortion facilities open up shop and they're not required to have any minimum standards. And the Virginia bill would set some standards.
Gotcha. All right. Well, as we look at what, as I mentioned earlier, the other side is saying here, I mean, Elizabeth Nash was quoted by the Associated Press. She is with the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-choice organization, is saying that these bills are just kind of an onslaught against their side, and saying that, you know, there's just been kind of this push, push by the pro-life side to ultimately get abortion outlawed in each and every state across the nation. Now, you, of course, handle, you know, state legislation, state-by-state legislation. But is there a push by National Right to Life to bring maybe some of these measures to maybe a more national stage legislatively?
Well, the bills that we have, the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, for instance, is being introduced in a number of states. We also have a number of bills that would say that you shouldn't use our tax dollars to pay for the death of an unborn child. What National Right to Life is trying to do is to provide more protection for the unborn child and to prevent their death by these abortion proponents who are in the business of killing children.
Sure. Now that, of course, kind of sets up where do we go from here? What are kind of the next steps? Any other big pieces of legislation that you are kind of looking for here in the next several months, or even approaching the 2012 election season?
Well, I can tell you there in New York that there's a bill that's been introduced to ban sex selection abortions. And unfortunately, sex selection abortions are a problem in New York State. There are a number of recent articles that have been published in your major newspapers there that indicate that abortions are being done for sex selection in New York. And you need this bill in order to prevent something like that. It's the type of legislation that has the support of the vast majority of the people in New York, and it would be a great thing if people supported that bill and got it passed this year.
All right. Well, Mary Spalding Bach with the National Right to Life, thanks so much for joining us here today on Currents. We appreciate your time and your insight.
My pleasure.
Stay tuned. There's much more Currents ahead. Violence erupts in Afghanistan after an American pastor burns the Quran. We'll have that story, plus the rest of the day's headlines, next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, Snooki, Lady Gaga, and JP2. It may not be the great debate, but we'll find out what they can tell us about the meaning of life. But first, let's have a look at today's headlines. Tragedy in the Ivory Coast. Caritas International says more than 1,000 civilians have been killed in one town there. A Caritas spokesman says it is not clear who is responsible, but says the killings happened in an area controlled by forces who support the country's opposition leader. Tensions have increased in the Ivory Coast since the United Nations enacted economic sanctions after repeated calls for the country's president to leave office. Meanwhile, there is one piece of good news from the Ivory Coast. Rome Reports has those details.
Caritas Internationales has announced that one of their kidnapped employees has been released in the Ivory Coast. Father Richard Kissy was abducted on March 29th by a group of armed men while he was driving to evacuate seminarians after violence had broken out in the area. The motives and identities of the kidnappers are still unknown, but Caritas has expressed its gratitude to have Father Kissy back in his role as the organization's director in the capital of Abidjan. The Catholic Aid Organization has been busy passing out food and providing health care to the thousands of displaced persons in Ivory Coast and Liberia. The UN estimates that around 500,000 people have been forced to leave their homes.
Well, turning now to Libya, where the leader of that country's Catholics says there have been more civilian casualties from bombing by international forces. The Apostolic Vicar of Tripoli tells the Vatican news agency Fides that the Libyan people are fed up with the situation. He says many of them have fled to Tunisia and also to Egypt to escape the bombings. Meanwhile, a car bomb took the life of a Catholic police officer over the weekend in another country that's seen its share of violence, Northern Ireland. It happened in the town of Omagh. The victim was only 25 years old and had recently joined the police force. The lead investigator called the murder brutal and grotesque. Turning now to Afghanistan, where at least 30 people have died in protests over a controversial Florida pastor's burning of the Quran. 20 United Nations workers were killed in one incident. At least 10 people died. 83 more were hurt in another protest. The head of the Catholic Church in neighboring Pakistan is calling on police in Florida to arrest Pastor Terry Jones, who burned the Koran. Meanwhile, Jones says he does not feel he's responsible for the deaths. He told ABC News that he is willing to die for his beliefs. Jones first gained prominence last year when he threatened to burn the Quran on September 11th, but he canceled those plans after a public outcry. Meanwhile, the accused mastermind of the 9/11 attacks will have his day in military court. Officials announced today that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 alleged co-conspirators would be tried in Guantanamo Bay rather than civilian court in Manhattan, as the Obama administration was initially seeking. Many critics objected to a civilian trial, arguing that the 5 men were being held as prisoners of war and not common criminals. And family members of some 9/11 victims are speaking out over a decision to relocate unidentified remains from the attacks. Plans are to have the remains moved underground to the September 11th Memorial Museum, which is scheduled to open in the fall.
They believe that the remains should be placed in a respectful and accessible location, such as something akin to the Tomb of the Unknowns, above ground. I repeat, above ground and separate from the museum.
Well, the remains are currently being stored in a temporary location near the office of New York City's chief medical examiner. Well, turning now to the Vatican, where new rules on money laundering have gone into effect. Anyone bringing $14,000 or more into Vatican City needs to declare it to Vatican authorities. The regulations are part of a wider financial regulations that went into effect following a fraud investigation into possible money laundering at the Vatican Bank. That investigation continues. Well, back here in the U.S., the Supreme Court has tossed out a lawsuit challenging tax breaks in Arizona for people who donate to scholarship programs for private schools. The scholarship program mainly benefits religious schools. Writing for the 5-4 majority, Justice Anthony Kennedy said the fact that the plaintiffs were taxpayers did not give them legal standing in the case. Well, most parents, want their kids to be quiet in church, but a pastor in Nebraska apparently wants the opposite. Middle schoolers at Nebraska's largest Catholic grade school were kicked out of Mass for not singing loudly enough. The Archdiocese of Omaha is reportedly looking into the incident. The chancellor there says that archdiocesan policy does not support the priest's action. And Nets was a winner at last night's New York Emmys. City of Churches program here on the station won for Best Religious Program, and we sent our cameras to the Marriott Marquis in Midtown Manhattan for the happy occasion.
We have a very good chance because we put out some good stuff, and whether we win or lose, we're here, and that's already half the battle.
I think it's gonna give me the award, most likely, most def.
If we don't win, it's still worth it being here tonight, because I think we have to remember the founders of the channel, and 40 years ago there was nothing. 40 years later, we have here an opportunity to get our first Emmy.
I feel like the hard work is done. Like right now, I am off duty.
If we don't win, we'll be a little bit sad, but what can you do?
And the Emmy goes to City of Churches.
Oh my God!
Special thanks to the Diocese of Brooklyn, Bishop DiMarzio, Christopher Quinn, the producers here, Eli Soriano, Keithang, and Lou Miano, and to the rest of the team over at NET. You guys are the best.
Gracias. This is for everybody, for all the Catholics. Thank you.
I feel fantastic to win. It's definitely a testament to the amazing work that we do at NET, as well as the hard work that the team actually puts in these shows. If we hadn't won, I would have been disappointed a little bit, but knowing that we had both Mysteries and City of Churches in the same category, I think we had a good shot.
Next year, I think we're gonna be here nominated. We're going to win more than one. We're gonna win 2 or 3 awards.
I love that. Set the sights even higher next time around. Congratulations to everybody who won for City of Churches and all the other winners as well. Stay tuned. There's much more currents ahead. When we return, Catholic women in the Diocese of Brooklyn take a stand against human trafficking.
It strips the individual, totally strips the individual of their humanity, their human dignity. It takes that away from them.
Welcome back. Well, just a few days ago, a federal judge sentenced a man to 40 years in prison for running a prostitution ring in Atlanta, Georgia. 10 women and girls, the youngest of them only 14 years old, were lured from Mexico with promises of a better life and, in some cases, marriage. These women crossed the border and entered into a life of servitude, suffering physical abuse from their captor and then being forced to have sex with up to a dozen men every night. And no one in the neighborhood had a clue about what was happening inside that house on the quiet block. Well, trafficking is a crime that happens everywhere but remains hidden. Described by anti-trafficking advocates as a modern-day form of slavery, it is the fastest-growing criminal industry in the world. And though authorities continue to make gruesome discoveries like the one in Atlanta and send traffickers to jail, this crime continues to thrive in the shadows. Bringing this crime and its victims into light was the goal of the National Council of Catholic Women's awareness-raising event that took place earlier this year as they and their allies launched their campaign for human dignity.
A Queens woman was charged with sex trafficking, promoting prostitution, and conspiracy for coercing young Korean women to apply for jobs at the nail salon. The nail salon. How many of us get our manis and petties at the nail salon? If they did not cooperate, she would reveal to their families, friends, and members of the community in Flushing that they were working as a prostitute, and then threatened to have Chinese gangs kill them. Flushing, again, right around the corner.
I just had a woman come up after the presentation and say, you know, what you said about the nail salon and human trafficking and the potential, she said, I realize now that I went someplace a couple years ago that the way that the proprietor was treating these people, something wasn't right. And she said, I know what's not right. And so she was asking for tips about how to spot it and what happens when you see it or have a hunch and where you should report.
12.3 million adults and children at any time are in forced labor and sexual servitude. 56% of these victims are women and girls. Here in New York City, the city has launched the Let's End Human Trafficking Community Awareness Campaign to help raise awareness among New Yorkers about this heinous form of exploitation. The Catholic Church is well positioned to identify and rescue survivors of human trafficking, but much more needs to be done.
We're really here to carry out the work that the bishops feel are important to our parish and to our diocese, and we as Catholic women want to be involved in carrying out that message.
Human trafficking is considered modern-day slavery. It is an invisible trade in human beings, our brothers and sisters. They become human cargo used in the machinery of economic globalization. It's bringing in about $9.5 billion into the United States alone. It strips the individual, totally strips the individual of their humanity, their human dignity. It takes that away from them.
When we talk about people being sold, we kind of push that and think that's on the other side of the world. But you know, it's right here. It's right here in our neighborhoods.
They have to be aware of what's going on. You know, I'm a grandmother, I'm a great-grandmother, I have young children that I come in contact with on a daily basis, and you want to protect them.
We are the eyes and ears on the ground about what's happening in our parishes and also our surrounding communities. And we take that information back and we funnel it up through the chain, and those concerns are always really taken with tremendous amount of care whenever we're reporting something back to the bishop's office.
We have so many immigrants in our diocese. We have so many people who are searching for a better life. And because this is a topic that is not spoken about enough, we don't know who is and who isn't enslaved in this process. Up to now, it's such a hidden situation that it's very difficult to get a handle on it.
You can affect systemic change when you're working together in collaboration to end human trafficking.
It's interesting, you know, the women today and the men who came to this meeting today are all saying, I need to go back and talk about this in my parish because I don't think we know about it. If that information can start to get out there, who knows? Who knows what might happen?
Who knows what might happen indeed. I mean, it is something that is very difficult to combat, just a very difficult situation all around because it happens in the shadows. But getting the word out there, the more people know about it, the more knowledge people have about exactly how to combat it, the easier that becomes, and hopefully that will be the case. Stay tuned, there's much more Currents coming up. Coming up, whether you're a monster, a reality TV fan, or a devout Catholic, or all three, there's something for everybody at this Theology on Tap.
What I did was I took quotes from Lady Gaga and Snooki that talk about materialism, that talk about a modern approach to life, and I compared and contrasted that to quotes from John Paul II.
And finally tonight, you finally know that you've made it in life when you're known by one name. Some examples for you: Liza, Madonna, Cher. And now we can add one other name to that list, also a female. This one from a raunchy hit reality TV show set on the Jersey Shore. Her name is Snooki. And in what some might see as the sad but true reality of our time, Snooki, known more for her tan than for her test scores, is making news today because Snooki was paid more than Pulitzer Prize-winning author Toni Morrison to speak to students on Rutgers campus. Yeah, as a matter of fact. And college campuses are apparently not the only places where you can hear Snooki pontificate on life's major questions. Just a few weeks back, Snooki made a guest appearance at a Theology on Tap at Most Precious Blood Church in Brooklyn, along with a few friends. Wait for it, Lady Gaga and Pope John Paul II. Okay, so maybe they weren't live and in person there. And what topic could possibly bring a reality show queen, a record-setting pop icon, and a beloved pope all together? Well, it was the meaning of life, of course.
So I thought it would be interesting to set up a bit of a debate, to set up a bit of a discussion, shall we say, between our three characters for the evening. Well, what is it that they're teaching? How are they affecting the faith? How are they affecting our society? And what is the proper response for us as Catholic Christians? This particular idea was mine because I have a lot of time on my hands, so I came up with the idea of having a little bit of a debate between the three of them. And basically that's what Theology on Tap is about, to try and take serious topics and try to discuss them in casual ways that will attract people. Tonight's Theology on Tap had a very unique title. It was called Across on the Jersey Shore. Snooki, Lady Gaga, and John Paul II debate the meaning of life. The main conflict was the lack of the spiritual, really, today. There's a lack of spirituality in popular culture. And we saw in the discussion that there's a great difference. So I used Snooki and Lady Gaga to represent modern popular culture, and I used John Paul II to represent the gospel. Unfortunately, Lady Gaga and Snooki turned down my offer. They couldn't be present this evening. What I did was I took quotes from Lady Gaga and Snooki that talk about materialism, that talk about a modern approach to life. And I compared and contrasted that to quotes from John Paul II. Well, basically, the judges were the people here today, but I kind of prompted them to say that John Paul won the debate.
It was really good, really interesting. I really am glad that someone took a topic. So I love that he brought in Jersey Shore. That's so prevalent today in our society, especially I work with high school kids. It's huge with high school. And with Lady Gaga, too, she's obviously one of the greatest pop culture stars right now. So to bring that into debate today, and with Pope John Paul II, I thought it was awesome.
I always wanted to try Theology on Tap, and I've never been to one. It sounded like a good idea to just have a free discussion and food and beer. So yeah, I think Lady Gaga and Snooki, their view on life is, I think it's childish and it's too simplistic.
We want to actually look good. We've been so busy that it's hard for us to even, go tanning, get a wax, get our hair done.
It might sound as a good idea for short term, but I don't think they're thinking too far. I don't think they're thinking about 20 years from now, and I don't think they're thinking about eternity.
I'm too old to know what Lady Gaga is saying about anything or Snooki. I'm way past that generation.
But certainly what the church teaches is basically what Christ himself taught, that the meaning of life is union with God. I think every person feels deep within themselves there's something more than what they see, what they touch, what they know, what they understand. And it's a yearning that we just have innately. We just can't deny it.
People stop me sometimes and ask that I look like Snooki. So, and my priest makes fun of me that I look like Snooki. It's kind of insulting, actually. I will be here for every Theology on Tap.
Well, so the basic takeaway, at least for me, from that is the meaning of life not contained in Snooki's book. You might want to, pick up the Bible, perhaps, if you would like a book to give you a little bit more about the meaning of life. But a great discussion there, very lively, very timely as well. Now, I'm not going to make you confess to being a Snooki fan. Your secret is safe with me. But I do want you to confess. Have you uploaded your video for the I Confess campaign yet? All you have to do is go to iconfess.com. You can enter there for your chance to win thousands of dollars in scholarship money. Now, trust me, it is just as easy as confession. All you have to do is submit a 1-minute video encouraging folks to go to confession on April 18th. It is also known as Reconciliation Monday. Go to iconfess.com for more information. Well, that is all for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, is Facebook to blame for destroying face-to-face relationships? We'll explore that and possibly find out an answer tomorrow. But until then, be sure to check us out online. We're at currentsny.net. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter if you prefer those methods of staying in touch with us. And if you have a question, maybe a comment or story idea, send us an email. Our email address is dropusaline@currentsny.net. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.